Let's just jump right in. We're talking about a multi-billion-dollar industry that's hiding in plain sight all across Taiwan. But here's the thing. It exists in this state of total legal contradiction.
So the big question is pretty simple on the surface. Is prostitution legal in Taiwan? Well, the answer is, not straightforward at all. It's basically a classic case of yes, but actually no.
And this right here is the heart of the whole puzzle. In theory, the law says, sure, sex work is legal. But, and this is a huge but, it's only legal inside a government-approved sex zone. The catch? In reality, not a single one of these zones has ever been set up. So this creates this bizarre legal limbo that forces the entire industry to operate illegally.
So how on earth did Taiwan end up with a law that legalizes something that can't legally exist? Let's take a look at the actual law that created this whole contradictory mess in the first place. It all goes back to 2011 with an amendment to the Social Order Maintenance Act. The idea was, to decriminalize sex work but keep it contained. So the national government created the rules for these legal sex zones, but then they just passed the entire responsibility of actually creating them over to the local city and county governments.
And the result? Well, more than a decade later, is a perfectly designed system that only exists on paper. Because no local government has been willing to touch it, the entire industry has been shoved into the shadows, operating outside of a law that was supposed to regulate it.
So with all that legal weirdness, how does this business actually work on a day-to-day basis? You might be surprised, but despite the ambiguity, the industry is pretty organized.
You can kind of break it down into a few different tiers. At the very top, you've got these high-end KTVs and hotels where the cost can be tens of thousands of Taiwan dollars. In the middle, you have massage parlors, which are often just fronts for, extra services. And then at the more grassroots level, you have these individual arrangements. They're literally called one floor, one phoenix, which are just negotiated directly.
Geographically, this stuff is pretty concentrated. In Taipei, the Wanhua district has always been the historic center of it all. You'll also find it in really busy nightlife spots like Ximending, and of course in the main entertainment districts of other big cities like Kaohsiung and Taichung.
Okay, so if the actual act of sex work is in this weird gray zone, what do the police really care about? Where do they actually draw the line and start making arrests?
Well, the law is crystal clear on a few things. While a one-on-one transaction might get a slap on the wrist, organized crime definitely does not. Pimping, running a brothel, forcing someone into it, any involvement of minors, and especially human trafficking, all of that is strictly forbidden and punished very harshly. And what that means in practice is that the police focus their time and energy on taking down criminal organizations and fighting exploitation. For an individual who gets caught, the consequence is usually just an administrative fine, not a criminal record, which kind of reflects that strange half-legal status of the whole thing. Now let's step back from the laws and the business models and talk about the human side of this. Who are the people actually working in this industry? And what are the hidden costs, especially for those who are most vulnerable? For the most part, the workforce is young. Most people fall somewhere in their 20s and 30s. Of course, that can change depending on the type of place, but that's really the core demographic. And if you look at where people come from, it's a mix. You have local Taiwanese, people from mainland China, and a really significant number from Southeast Asian countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines. And this diversity brings us to a much darker, much more critical issue. Yeah, this is where the human cost becomes painfully clear. Because the whole industry operates in the shadows, it creates the perfect environment for exploitation. Foreign nationals are especially vulnerable here. They often face language barriers, they don't know their legal rights, and that makes them prime targets for trafficking networks. So, why does this legal mess even exist? It's really for one simple reason. Taiwanese society is deeply and fundamentally split on what to do about the sex industry. Which brings us right back to that key question. If the law has been on the books since 2011, allowing for these zones, why doesn't a single one exist? Well, the roadblocks are both social and political. On the ground, you have this fierce, not-in-my-backyard opposition from communities. I mean, nobody wants a designated red light district near their homes, or their kids' schools, or their temples. And for the politicians, trying to create a sex zone is seen as politically toxic. It's a risk that no local government has been willing to take. This political paralysis really comes from two opposing camps with totally different ideas.
On one side, you have health advocates and NGOs who are pushing for full decriminalization. They're focused on public health, on labor rights, and on using the legal system to protect workers. But on the other side, you've got some women's groups and religious organizations arguing for much stricter rules. And they're driven by moral objections and a desire to just get rid of the industry altogether.
So, with the law stuck in limbo and society at a stalemate, what are the most urgent challenges that need to be dealt with no matter which path is eventually chosen?
There are really four big ones. First, public health. This gray market makes it way harder for workers to get healthcare and STI prevention. Second, fighting human trafficking has to remain a top priority. Third is protecting the victims, especially foreign nationals who desperately need legal and language support. And finally, the biggest mountain to climb, finding some kind of social agreement to finally break this political deadlock.
And that's really the heart of it all. Taiwan has a law in the books that was literally designed to solve this problem, but it's never actually been put into practice. The country is just stuck at a crossroads with a system that makes nobody happy and leaves the most vulnerable people at risk.
So it all comes down to this choice. Should the focus be on stricter punishments to try and stamp out the industry? Or should it be on a public health and human rights approach that tries to manage it safely? This is the fundamental question that Taiwan, as a society, still hasn't answered.